Without objection, the House will have under consideration House Bill number 366. Could gentleman from District 21?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd ask unanimous consent to dispense with further reading of House Bill 366. Thank you. House Bill 366 is the Fetal Heartbeat Preborn Child Protection Act. Now, if you've been following this, you may be aware of, Mr. Speaker, may I ask unanimous consent to refer to other legislation. Thank you. So if you've been following this, you may be aware that the Senate Bill 1183 is identical to this bill with just a couple of important word changes that do not change the meaning but correct an incorrect word choice in the original bill. You should be aware that passed out of the Senate easily, and we begin here then with House Bill 366. We want to save baby lives. When does life begin? It begins at conception. If you read from the bill, page 1, line 28, the life of each human being begins at fertilization, and unborn children have interest in life, health, and well-being that should be protected. Our ultimate goal, of course, is to overturn Roe versus Wade and make abortion illegal in Idaho and in the U.S. While we wait, we still want to save babies. Compelling interest. The state has a compelling interest to protect the lives of the unborn for that next 9 months and for the 100 years that follow. 1973, a poorly addressed, poorly adjudicated, poorly resulted Supreme Court decision, Roe versus Wade, made up a right to an abortion and established a trimester framework allowing the states a compelling interest in that third trimester, those last 13 weeks. Well, what do we do with that compelling interest? What does the state do with that compelling interest? We work on maybe a partial birth abortion ban. 1992, in Planned Parenthood versus Casey, this topic came up again before the Supreme Court. And they unfortunately continued that right to an abortion in their decision, but they reworked the framework and talked about viability. 22 weeks, 24 weeks. State has compelling interest in just those last 18 weeks, 16 weeks. What do you do with that? Well, we work on pain-capable bills. We look at dismemberment bans. But, you know, the vast majority of abortions occur before 24 weeks. House Bill 366 dramatically pushes the compelling interest line like never before to the heartbeat. 8 weeks, compelling interest. You know, Planned Parenthood versus Casey talked about viability. Viability, a preborn baby with a heartbeat has a 95% chance of reaching full term. That sounds like viability. Ultimately, we want to see Roe versus Wade overturned. What do we do in the meantime? What do we do while we wait? We keep pushing bills like House Bill 366. We keep pushing the line. House Bill 366 attempts to substantially move the line of Idaho's compelling interest in a preborn child life. 12 other states have passed similar legislation. North Dakota, Idaho, Iowa, Missouri, Arkansas, Louisiana, Ohio, Kentucky, Tennessee, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, most recently South Carolina, Idaho, and very soon Texas and Arizona. The effective date of this bill, it'd be poor form of us to bring this to the Ninth Circuit Court, where I predict we lose in court, in an appellate court, and set bad precedent for 12 other states who are fighting the same battle in perhaps more friendly courts. And so we have a delay that says we want to see this type of language upheld in an appellate court. And then we come on. What we also want to see is perhaps some disagreement among those appellate courts. Maybe we don't want disagreement, but I suspect there will be some. And that then gives us the opportunity to bring our compelling interest argument all the way to the Supreme Court. Let's pile on and apply pressure to the Supreme Court to hear such things, to make our case for our state's compelling interest. Let's tell Idahoans there's a baby in there, and that abortion stops a beating heart. Something you can see and hear for yourself. Please support House Bill 366. And if I might, a good speaker, I would like to turn some time over to the good gentleman from District 13.
Will the gentleman yield?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The gentleman yields.
You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members of the body. The attempt with House Bill 366 is to set a court precedent as to when viability begins. That's what's at stake with abortion legislation today. When does viability begin? The court has ruled viability does not begin until the child is born. And that's why you have the horrific practice we know as abortion. The attempt of House Bill 366 with the heartbeat legislation is to establish viability when you can detect a beating heart. You're dead when you no longer have a heartbeat. So the inverse logic could apply that your life begins, or you are alive, when you can detect a heartbeat. And that's the question that we want the court to answer with respect to House Bill 366. You're going to hear possibly some arguments today that this bill doesn't do anything. I would disagree. This bill allows the question to be asked of the court, when does viability to begin, and is the heartbeat a viable method to determine that that's when life would begin? You're going to also hear opponents of the legislation say that this could put other legislation, pro-life legislation that we have passed in this body, at risk, namely the trigger law. And I have told those opponents that should that be the case, that the court would agree with us that life would begin when they can detect a heartbeat, that we would come in and correct that. This is a very pro-life legislature. Idaho is a pro-life state. So I would encourage your vote on behalf of House Bill 366 today. I think it's good public policy. I think it puts Idaho at the forefront of this issue. And because we are in the Ninth Circuit, it also can establish that question before the Ninth Circuit as to when life begins. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Is there further debate? Good gentleman from District 17.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, like it or not, Roe versus Wade is the law now. And no one can predict if, and I mean if, or how that decision will ever be changed. So therefore, it's premature and not really a meaningful use of our time to consider legislation that isn't lawful and which depends upon some future act to be legal, and whatever future acts that occur, if there were any, might not be in accord with this particular bill. In addition, I note that the bill severely restricts the protections from victims of rape and incest by requiring reports to authorities. And in some cases, factually, this may mean that there is absolutely no right, no practical right whatsoever to stop an unwanted pregnancy that results from despicable acts such as rape and incest. Therefore, I encourage your red light. Thank you.
Is there further debate? Good lady from District 1.
Thank you. I wonder if the gentleman from 21 would yield to a question.
Would the good gentleman yield?
Certainly.
How many yields?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good gentleman. 42% of our abortions are by the strong medication that women take and then abort at home. And the FDA just approved that women during the COVID can get the pills without a doctor's visit. And this bill talks about a doctor's visit. Can you let me know what that looks like when the FDA says you don't need a doctor's visit, and then according to this bill, they do need a doctor's visit? What happens with the FDA?
Gentleman from 21.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good lady from District 1. In Idaho, a doctor's visit...
Lady from 1. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Please
Speaker.
proceed with the answer to the good lady's question.
Thank you. In Idaho, a doctor's visit is required to receive abortive medication.
Is there further debate? Will the gentleman yield to another question?
Yes.
The gentleman yields.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good gentleman. I just think I'm unclear. So if the FDA says you don't have to get a visit to get the pills, you're saying that this law would stand up to that? Is that what you're saying?
No,
That we
21.
would... Okay.
Thank you. So I don't need to speak to the FDA rules and regulations, I suppose. That sounds outside of my bailiwick. Certainly federal agencies making opinions on things. But in Idaho, and not because of this bill, a doctor's visit is required before you receive abortive medications.
Is there further debate? Good gentleman from 16.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We vote on a lot of legislation on this topic, and I'm sure those of you who have been here longer than I have voted on a lot more. And I'm a little confused. I'm confused because despite how much legislation we vote on this issue, if you look at health statistics in the state of Idaho, the number of abortions it's flat. It's unchanged by all these different things that we keep passing related to abortion. And I guess my invitation to members of this body is there are things we could do to change that. Colorado did that. They passed a bill that cut the number of teen abortions in half. You don't have to wait for Roe v. Wade to be overturned to pass a bill that does not offend the constitutionally protected right to choose and also has the effect of reducing the number of abortions. So I'll be giving this my red light because, like the good gentleman from 13 said, I'm one of those people that thinks this does nothing. Nothing. Thank you.
Gentleman from 34.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll be supporting this bill and voting for it, although I do want to point out a few concerns I have, but then some good news about it. Number one is one of the unfortunate, probably unintended messages that might be taken from a bill like this is that if we are protecting life once a heartbeat is protected, that babies in the womb who are human and living individuals, that their lives somehow do not matter. I think those lives matter as well and should be protected just as any other human life should be protected. Number two, because it's a so-called trigger bill, it is subjecting Idaho law to the decision of some district court across the country. And so how that court decides is what is determining what Idaho law is. I would like to reserve the rights of making Idaho law to our legislature where it properly belongs. And so I don't like ceding that authority to any district court across the country. But finally, the support for this bill comes from me because we do need to protect all innocent human life. And we should really be sending the message that all innocent human life should be protected by passing an abolish abortion bill completely. That would make it so any human life is protected, regardless of its age. I'll finish by noting that as our Lord and Savior said, he said, "Behold your little ones." We have a responsibility to protect our little ones. And so I'll be supporting this bill on the chance that it could save some little ones in the future.
Is there further debate? The lady from 10.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In support of the bill, I had a constituent who asked me why are mostly male voices stating why we should have these abortion bills. And so I'm not sure of a lot of things, but I am sure I'm a female, and I'd like to speak in support of the bill, and simply to say that I'm not going to use statistics because they can be used to say whatever you want them to say, but what I do know to be true is that when a mother and a father have the opportunity to actually hear the heartbeat of that child in the womb, the chances of them making a decision to let that pregnancy go to term, even if they choose not to keep the child, but maybe to put the child up for adoption, are just better. So I agree that we shouldn't be doing things that have no effect. I think maybe that bill last year, maybe it is the gold standard, but it hasn't been in effect yet. So let's do something that can be in effect possibly sooner than later than Roe versus Wade being overturned. Thank you. Oh, I'm voting yes, just so you're clear. Voting yes.
Thank you. Good lady from District 35.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just briefly, the good gentleman said something about, like it or not, we have Roe versus Wade, and most of us don't like it, and so this bill will help to address that. I, as a few others have expressed, and I think most of us believe, I'm not speaking for you, but I think we believe that life does start at conception. If this is a way that we can save some of these beautiful little children, I am all for that. I just wanted to say that this became more real for me when I read a story about a woman that had been a director in one of the abortion places. And she said, you know, a lot of these young women feel very desperate and they aren't sure what to do. And it's so great that now we have places like, I don't know if I can mention anything, Stanton Healthcare and other ones that really try to help these young women with decisions. And so they're worthy of my support. And I just think I want to be on record as saying that I support this, although I would like to see it save all babies as we can. Thank you.
Is there further debate? Lady from 1.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm going to testify against this bill. Here we have another pro-life bill and an opportunity. Once again, we're not going to end abortion. Since 2010, we'd have 12 pro-life, and I use that word loosely in this body, bills that have come through this body, and we still have not ended abortion. And I don't believe House Bill 366 is going to end the murder of babies. Just for the record, again, I'm 100% pro-life, and I just believe all life is valuable. And I'm going to tell you the problems I have with this legislation. So on page 1, line 36, it says that the life of each human being begins at fertilization, and unborn children have an interest in life, health, and well-being and should be protected. So we're already saying that at fertilization, we think we should be protecting life. Our Idaho Code, 184016, says an embryo or fetus shall mean a human being. And in 184001, It says murder is the unlawful killing of a human, including but not limited to an embryo or fetus. So what that means is a fetus is defined as a baby or a human being. To kill the fetus, some people call it a baby, kill the fetus is murder, even in the case of abortion. But what our law does is gives an exemption to a mother or a doctor who decides to kill that baby. While this bill seems like good on the outside, and we all care about babies, and a heartbeat is important, we just said in our law that life begins at fertilization. So why are we changing that starting point? Why are we now talking about heartbeats when we've already said it starts at fertilization? Overall, what this bill does is it says you cannot kill a fetus, an embryo, or baby if you hear a heartbeat. And then we ask the doctor, the ones that's actually going to be doing the abortion, that's getting paid to do the abortion, we ask him to go listen for the heartbeat, or her. And then there's a penalty section of the bill if the doctor performs the abortion anyway. But the last part of the bill talks about the effective date. And what the bill says on page 3, line 16, it says this bill is effective upon certain occurrences. The occurrences is the United States Appellate Court having a case judgment upholding a similar bill that has to do with heartbeats. So I can see, let's just say that happens. Let's just say a heartbeat bill passes in another appellate court. And it's got to be similar. So I can see the first challenge right there is that our law is not considered as similar enough, and I can see a lawsuit then. But the big problem to me is that this is a trigger bill. We are relying on the courts to let us know when we can kill babies. It's just wrong. It's just wrong. We're ceding our power to write law. We're letting the courts do that, and it's called judicial supremacy. And I don't believe that it's the court's job to define it. We're defining when life is. We're defining how you can do an abortion, when you can do an abortion. If we're going to do that, why are we saying it a heartbeat? And while we wait on the appellate court to give us a ruling, there'll be 29 babies murdered this week within 20 miles of this Capitol. And next year, when we come back, if there has been a court hearing, we'll be up to 1,500 babies. Every day, babies are being killed in this state. 29 a week right around here. You know, 49 out of the 50 states, they're not waiting for a court decision when it comes to marijuana. Even though the courts have said, and there's federal law on marijuana, the federal law says it's illegal. They understand states' rights. And I often wonder why those states are exercising their rights on marijuana, but not babies' lives, not human life. And when you get into trigger law scenarios, what happens when the federal law that we say is supreme and there's a Supreme Court ruling on our guns? Are we going to stand up and say, federal Supreme Court, you don't tell us what to do? We make our own laws in Idaho. I believe laws should be written by legislatures, not by the courts. So I have a real problem when we put this decision-making into our courts. And if you're the eternal optimist, and they've brought it up earlier, and you think the Supreme Court is going to overrule Roe versus Wade, well, there's at least 40 other cases that would have to be overturned also. And courts don't overturn their own decisions. And if you need proof of that, just look to the Dred Scott case. That court has never pulled back its decision. There's another part of this bill that I do have a problem with, and when the bill talks about babies and what babies are allowed to be killed, it doesn't matter if they have a heartbeat. So on page 2, line 42 and 43, it says that if a baby was conceived out of rape or incest, you don't need to even look for a heartbeat. You can just abort the baby then. Those babies are important. Those fetuses, babies, embryos are important. Why would we put that in code to discriminate against how a baby was conceived? Why would we pull out that group of babies? Would we pull out girl babies, boy babies, different racial babies? No, then why are we allowing the killing of babies just because of how they were made? It's not right. Another issue I have with this bill is the penalties for violation. It is not equal protection. So if you go look at the penalties, so we tell them you have to look for a heartbeat. If you see a heartbeat, you can't abort. And if they do it anyway, if the lady says, go ahead, do it anyway, let's take care of this, what happens? We punish the doctor only and not the woman. And it's her decision to make that decision. So this is not equal protection under the law. The other thing I have a problem with this too is when we take the judicial supremacy route, which we're doing, saying the federal government is supreme. Federal government or the Supreme Court has said that we can't stand between a woman and her abortion up to 6 weeks. 6-week-old baby. That's pretty pregnant. So we can't make any decisions. We have to allow abortions up to that. 24 weeks, which is, did I say 6 weeks? I meant 6 months. 6 months. So a 6-month pregnant woman with a 6-month-old baby. So if the courts have already said that, why do we think passing a bill to say, no, the heartbeat, we're going to just put, the Supreme Court is the Supreme Court. If you're going to buy into federal supremacy, I don't think there's anything more supreme than the Supreme Court. So you think an appellate court's going to make a decision and the Supreme Court's not going to be supreme to that? They're not going to overturn this. The only way to end this is the same way we dealt with black people in this country. Every state had to stand up and take a stand that this will not happen in our state. If you want to kill your babies and you want to smoke your marijuana or do your drugs, go to Oregon, go to Washington, go to California. But I want our state to be different. I don't want us killing babies in this state. And I just do not believe this is the right route with judicial supremacy, putting all our power into the hands of the courts. And my other concern is every pro-life bill, and like I said, I use that term loosely, every pro-life bill that comes out of this body does not end abortion in this state. We need to just put an end to abortion in this state. We're regulating what babies can be killed, how they can be killed, what types. It's sickening. It is sickening that we even have to look at bills like this, and we put this into law that we're going to murder babies. Because if you look at the language that you are putting into our code, we're saying it's okay to kill babies, just certain ones. It just depends on how they were. We're putting that into our law, and we're responsible for that. We're going to be accountable for that someday. That's all I have to say. I just hope you really consider this route we're going down with judicial supremacy. I truly believe it's a dangerous route. We're already setting up federalism committees to look at federal overreach, federal fingers into our state. We need to take a stand as a state, as a legislature, as a moral people, that this is not allowed in our state anymore. So I urge you to vote no. And I know it'll be hard because this will be sold in your districts as legislator voted against the heartbeat bill. But you know what? It's time we educate the citizens what we're actually doing here. And it's time that these pro-life and pro-choice groups stop making money off every year we pass a bill one way or another, and they're making money off of us.
I object. I think she's impugning the motives of individuals that are trying to end this horrific practice called abortion.
Please take into consideration the gentleman's objection as you finish your debate.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I don't. They do make money because of these court cases. Every single decision we make goes to court. Almost every decision, and it's an opportunity for everyone on either side of the issue to fund their agendas, which we want agendas being pushed, but we're not fixing anything. Only we can fix it. And that's when we start taking a stand and say, all life is important in Idaho. Not just when it starts at the heartbeat, but I'm talking life that starts at conception, and we will not kill our babies in Idaho. Thank you.
Is there further debate? Gentleman from 16.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good ladies and gentlemen. Last night, my spouse and I had the privilege of babysitting our great-granddaughter, and today she's going to be 21 days old. And that was a wonderful time for us. I know I look like I'm way too young to be a great-grandfather, but it's because I moisturize. But it was a precious time, and those of you who have had babies or grandbabies, I know you know what that time is like, that it's such a precious moment. You have this opportunity to look at this baby and know that there's a promise, that there's a hope for a future. And that's really how we looked at her last night. At the same time, we also know that her parents had an important decision that they had to make. And whatever decision that they were going to make with regard to bringing that child into the world, we were going to support as their family. The choice that a woman has, I believe, is a choice that she makes in consultation with her family, with her physician, and her faith. And to me, that's where that choice belongs. I agree with the sentiments that we should protect all life. Let's protect all life. Let's protect life also after the child comes out of the womb. Ensure that they have good education, that they don't have to live in poverty. Let's protect black lives. Let's protect black gay lives. Let's protect black trans lives. Let's protect all life. I'll be a no on this.
The lady from 11.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm going to tell you a story briefly. Okay, I want to take you back about 15 years to a mother that had 4 rambunctious boys and found out that she was pregnant with a little girl. And that pregnancy ended up becoming very complicated as it progressed, to the point where she ended up in the hospital around 14 weeks pregnant, and was told that she was probably not going to be able to keep this pregnancy. And she was offered an abortion. And for a brief minute, that was going to be the easiest and the best way out, because she knew that by keeping this pregnancy, she was going to have to sacrifice herself and her family's time and everything else that went along with it to be able to try to sustain the pregnancy, even though the odds were not in her favor. But she decided to go ahead and pursue that and to sustain the pregnancy, and she had great support throughout the pregnancy, and weekly ultrasounds were done. Every time she's had that ultrasound done, she saw that beating heart, and she saw that little life inside of her growing and developing and kicking and moving and doing all those things that babies do and that are fun to watch while they're in the womb. And things transpired. She ended up back in the hospital around 27 weeks and delivered a baby via C-section who weighed in at 1 pound and 15 ounces. And this baby was rushed to the NICU. The NICU doctor came down to talk to this mother and her family and told her that they didn't think that this baby was going to make it, and that if you wanted to see your baby, you better get down there right now to do so. When she got there, that little baby girl was purple. Her oxygen sats were in the 30s, and she ended up spending about 110 days in the NICU with lots of issues, lots of things that transpired. But that baby is now a healthy and happy 14-year-old. That mother never regrets her decision and the sacrifice that she made to be able to sustain that life. And that is what caused me to be able to last session work really, really hard to try to bring forth this piece of legislation. That baby's my daughter. And I would never, ever, and I never do, regret one moment, one piece of sacrifice, the bed rest, the doctor's appointments, the sacrifice that my family gave, my young boys that didn't really have a mother for about 5 months. I would never regret that, because that little girl is a happy, healthy 14-year-old running circles around her brothers, and is going to make a dent in this world for the good. So I appreciate the efforts of those involved in bringing forth this legislation. And while I agree with the good lady from District 1 that this does not go far enough, it is taking a chunk, it is taking a bite, and if we can save one life, I think it's going to be worth it. I'm so glad that I could set the foundation and pave the way in the state of Idaho to bring forth this legislation. And like I said, I worked really hard to lay that groundwork and that foundation last session. I hope in the future we can bring forth even stronger legislation and try to save all babies, because I think all lives do matter. And I think we need to be able to look at what we're doing in the state of Idaho and lead that way to be able to make sure that all babies have that chance of survival in life. And although sometimes it is a sacrifice to bring them into this world, I can never say that I've met anyone that has regretted that choice. And so I'll be supporting this piece of legislation.
Good gentleman from District 3.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and good gentlemen and ladies of the House. Many of you will vote for this bill and walk away from session with a clear conscience, knowing that we have done something to potentially end the wicked practice of abortion. I'm going to vote against this bill in support of the good lady from District 1 who listed at least 6 or 7 reasons why it is not sufficient. First of all, it's a trigger bill. We walk away, and I guarantee you, nothing will change. We will have a good feeling. This is just a good feeling bill. It will accomplish nothing. It isn't until we get to the point where we as a body and the state of Idaho are enraged enough to end this wicked practice rather than try and fix it piecemeal. It's a all or nothing approach, in my opinion. We will not exercise our 10th Amendment rights to control the issue of murder of innocent children by just sugarcoating it. And by sugarcoating it, I mean we even changed the definition of murder that we currently have in our statute The abortion provider is now only guilty of the crime of abortion and not of murder. Let's not sugarcoat it anymore. We keep degrading even the terms that we use to describe this act. We're also schizophrenic in this bill. On page 1, the bottom of the page, we recognize that life begins at fertilization. So we're willing to give up all those children from the point of fertilization until we can detect a heartbeat. How is that helping our cause? And lastly, we're only protecting the lives of some of these children, and we're blaming the children by not protecting them by the sins of their, in this case, the father, which would be committing the crime of rape or incest. Let's go back to the days of the Emancipation Proclamation. Can you imagine President Lincoln saying, we're going to free all of the slaves except those who have been beaten by their masters. And if you have scars, you're not freed. That is the same type of situation that we're doing here by saying those children who have been conceived in rape or incest, who are not guilty of the sins of their parents, are to be punished by this bill. So I will be voting against this bill because it doesn't go far enough. Thank you.
Is there further debate? Hearing none. Lady from 19.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to debate against the bill. Banning abortion care doesn't eliminate abortions. It doesn't reduce abortions. It makes them less safe, and it drives people to black market options. Last year, when we debated a similar bill, I shared some experience, a personal experience from my family, and how the lack of access to safe abortion care just impacted the course of that family. And it made my grandmother and her siblings orphans. Because you see, my great-grandmother was a widow, and she had 3 kids, and she started dating a man who turned out to be abusive. And so when she ended up pregnant, she was desperate not to have his baby. The only option she had at that time was to try to give herself an abortion, and she died from the complications. People have personal, diverse reasons for seeking abortion care. And again, banning abortion care will only make abortions less safe and drive people to unsafe black market options. We can look at global data to see no correlation between the number of abortions occurring and whether the procedure is legal. In my husband's home country of Peru, abortion is illegal, but you can't walk down the street without seeing these little stickers with cell phone numbers that you can call if your menstruation has ceased and you need help to get it started again. And I think we all know what that means. My mother-in-law is a medical director at a clinic in Peru, and they have a standard protocol for the steady stream of women who show up with complications due to botched abortions. This bill will have uneven impacts. Some people will have the means to easily and comfortably cross the state border to get safe abortion care from a qualified provider. But this bill will make it harder for low-income women, women of color who don't have the social networks to borrow money to make that trip. This narrows their options to unsafe options. And so with that, for the safety and health of pregnant people, I urge your no vote.
Is there further debate? Lady from 18.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To debate against the bill. Well, I guess I want to start by debating in support of our taxpayers, because the only thing this bill will do is cost taxpayers money. That's it. And I think, as many of you know, this state has not won a case under the Constitutional Defense Fund since, I believe, 1996. Congratulations, it is our 25th anniversary. But this will prolong that unfortunate record. Now, the trigger in this, it goes into effect when a court of appeals that has no control over us upholds such a bill. Now, the good sponsor mentioned that a number of states have passed such bills. What he did not mention is that not one has been upheld. They have all been struck down in court. And this will be no different. The only thing that will change this is if Roe v. Wade is reversed. We already have a law on the books that will ban abortion in Idaho if Roe v. Wade is reversed. But what this bill tries to do is go into effect if, say, a Texas appeals court or a Louisiana appeals court upholds a, quote, heartbeat abortion ban. That has no precedential control over Idaho. The fact that an appeals court in Texas would uphold such a bill, which they haven't, but if they ever should, that doesn't mean it covers Idaho. That means we're headed to court and we are going to lose up and until such time, if it ever happens, that Roe v. Wade is struck down by the Supreme Court. So all this does, literally all it does, is walk us into expensive losing litigation, and is ostensibly redundant insofar as it ever could take effect. It's completely redundant of the law we already have on the books, which is the trigger bill y'all passed last year. I also wanted to clarify, because there was some suggestion. Now, the Supreme Court has been very clear that abortion rates prior to the point of viability are illegal. Now, it has been suggested that a heartbeat meets the standard of viability. It does not. Viability means capable of independent existence. That means outside of the mother's body. It does not mean inside of the mother's body. So there is no way that detection of a heartbeat could meet the viability standard as applied by courts. I also want to point out that the only way in early stages, my understanding, that you can detect a heartbeat is through a transvaginal ultrasound. So this would essentially mandate that women seeking an abortion would have to undergo that procedure. That was a really unpopular proposal back about a decade ago when it was first brought in. People at the time didn't like the idea of their legislature forcing women to undergo transvaginal ultrasounds. And I'm not happy to see us dipping our toes in that water again. But putting aside the burden on the substantial burden on taxpayers that this presents, I think we need to acknowledge that everybody in this room wants as few abortions as possible. Everybody in this room loves and values babies. I have 4 children myself. I would happily die for any of them. I would do anything for any of them. But there are so many far more effective and safe ways to reduce abortion. Frankly, ways that this body has systematically rejected. There are so many options to meaningfully reduce abortion rates in manners that fully respect women's freedom and autonomy. We know that, well, the top on the list is access to free contraception. Access to free contraception has been found to decrease abortion rates by an excess of 60%. That is something that this body did everything in its power for 7 years to prevent people from having access to. We know comprehensive sex education, access to affordable quality childcare, paid family leave, increasing the minimum wage. All of these have serious demonstrated power to reduce the number of abortions. And all of these, this body has done everything in its power to obstruct. So frankly, I'm very frustrated when this body comes in claiming that its top priority is to reduce abortions, when it has at every step sought to obstruct every policy that would effectively reduce abortions while fully respecting women's freedom and autonomy. And it's very frustrating to me that the only option this body is willing to consider when it comes to reducing abortion is having the government commandeer women's bodies and force them against their will to go through involuntary pregnancy and childbirth.
I object to the use of terms like commandeer women's bodies. I think we're crossing a line there.
Okay, please proceed with that objection in mind.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think it's an extremely factual assessment of what is going on. It is forcing women to undergo something against their will in their bodies. But that being said, it is very frustrating to me that the only option this body will consider in the face of a vast array of, in my mind, far better alternatives and far more effective alternatives, but the only thing that we'll consider is forcing women to go through pregnancy and childbirth against their will. I think this is inconsistent with principles of freedom and autonomy, and I will be giving it my red light.
Thank you. Is there further debate? Good lady from District 31.
Mr. Speaker, and good ladies and gentlemen, as I mentioned yesterday, the gold standard for freedom is not the ability to do anything you want. We protect freedom when we protect the conditions that allow freedom to exist. And life is one of those conditions for all of us. I'm a mother. I have 10 children. I know a little bit about what it's like to have a baby. I've felt babies respond to light, to music, to touch, to my voice. There's no doubt in my mind that they are individual and that they are intelligent. If that isn't enough, I had a baby 2.5 months early, within just a couple of weeks of when many babies who are considered not viable are aborted and killed. I held that baby. I sang to that baby. I sat by that baby in Primary Children's Hospital for 3 months. We brought that baby home on oxygen. Without oxygen, without the medical care and support that baby received, he would not have been viable. He's been here to the legislature, and many of you have met him. Andrew is now taller than almost everybody in our family. You can't protect freedom without protecting life. This is a compromise if you believe that perfection is the only option. Then it may be a poor compromise. But in my book, a step in the right direction, even if it doesn't hit the high mark, is the right thing to do. And I will be a yes. Thank you.
Is there further debate? Good gentleman from District 19.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to make sure I listen to everyone, and I'm glad I did that because almost everyone said all of the things that I wanted to say. I just wanted to put a couple of finer points on a few of important things. To reinforce what the good lady from 18 said, the fiscal note does need to be updated. It does need to account for the fact that this is going to cost about $250,000 to the taxpayers. That 25-year history makes it pretty easy to estimate that number, and I think the fiscal note is a little misleading. Second, I think the bill itself, specifically the definitions section, is misleading and you could possibly argue manipulative. The definition of cardiopulmonary death, it seems pretty accurate. It's the reigning common law standard. The American Medical Association has adopted it. Most states have adopted it. But the definition of fetal heartbeat is a real head scratcher to me, and I'm just going to read it here, and I hope someone can help me understand this. We are being asked to define fetal heartbeat this way. Fetal heartbeat means embryonic or fetal. Fetal heartbeat means embryonic. Fetal means embryonic. Fetus means embryonic. Fetus means embryonic. No, it doesn't. A fetus is a fetus and an embryo is an embryo. They're totally different. Embryos can't have hearts. They can't even have early versions of hearts. I'm not comfortable adopting that definition, and my Good Morning Committee chair knows that I like to feel my definitions, and I cannot feel that one. Third, this bill does something this body has repeatedly said we should never do. Mr. Speaker, I request unanimous consent to refer to prior legislation that has passed this body but not yet been signed into law.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 48 hours ago, while debating a prohibition on mask mandates, numerous members of this body stood up to passionately argue that we should never make women relive past trauma, even if it's to promote the well-being of others. But that's what we're talking about doing right now. We're talking about requiring women to undergo transvaginal ultrasounds for the purported aim of protecting fertilized eggs. Even though we just said 48 hours ago, we can't put women through past trauma to protect other people. Still scratching my head on that one. But that is not the only thing. There's more. This bill deliberately narrows the rape and incest exemption, knowing full well that mandatory reporting requirements will compound the trauma. Here's why. Police reports for sexual assault allegations take on average 3 months to generate. 3 months. Under this bill, those reports, which cannot be released to third parties while the investigation is still underway, those reports will almost never be available in the time required under this bill. So we can say, If you were sexually assaulted and if you want to have an abortion, a constitutionally protected abortion, just bring your police report, knowing that it will not be available and it probably won't even be complete. I think that requirement, and based on the standard that we established and endorsed 48 hours ago, is mean, it's incomprehensible, it's inconsiderate, and mostly it's unconstitutional, which brings me to my final point. This bill is blatantly unconstitutional. Let me just give you a preview of what the judge is going to say after she or he takes our $250,000. This is what they're going to tell us. First, they're going to rule, as the good lady from 18 mentioned earlier, as they repeatedly have, that trying to suppress the constitutional rights of Idaho's women by promoting the rights of pre-viable fetuses is not acceptable. It's unconstitutional. And if something is unconstitutional, it's un-American. I'm almost done, I promise. But our case is going to be weakened by another reality. This bill argues that the life of each human begins at fertilization and that it should be protected. That is the legitimate state interest we are declaring. And when you declare a legitimate state interest, it's a big deal. And the court is going to look closely at how seriously you take that interest. So while we can say that Idaho harbors a deep commitment to doing anything to protect our youngest people, we're going to have to demonstrate that. And the court is going to look at other votes we've taken this session to see if we really mean it. Do we really do whatever we can do, whatever we think we can do or should do, to put our youngest Idahoans in a position to be the best versions of themselves? And I think if you go through the legislative record over the last 3 months, someone could reasonably conclude that we seem to be inconsistent in that regard. So I think the judge is going to say, "Dear Idaho, I'm sorry." And this is what the judge wrote last month when they struck this bill down in South Carolina. "I'm sorry, but you failed to demonstrate that your alleged interest in fertilized eggs is strong enough. You failed to demonstrate that your interest in fertilized eggs is strong enough." So in summary, if we really care about our younger kids, I think we need to start demonstrating it. I almost feel like we're in a situation where we talk about these fertilized eggs, but then we don't want to talk about life after fertilization. It's like the young couple who just wants to talk about their wedding, but they haven't put any thought into their marriage and the hard work it takes. And I would hope we don't fall down that same trap. Please vote no.
Is there further debate? Hearing none? Will the good gentleman from District 21 please stand and close the debate?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll keep my close short. There's been a lot of misconstruing going on, I'll say. My word. I do want to bring the rhetoric down a bit. We want to see Roe versus Wade overturned. We're not waiting for it. I heard that a few times. Somehow this means we're waiting for that to be overturned. This is what we do in the meantime. This is what we say, we're still moving, we still care, we're still pushing the envelope. It's where we say that not only Idaho, but maybe dozens of other states will eventually have a similar opinion. Will there be controversy in the circuit courts of appeals? Yes. Will that cause the Supreme Court to pay attention? Yes. Does this make a difference? Yes. Does this tell Idahoan moms and dads that there's a baby in there? Yes. Does this tell everyone that Idaho thinks we have a compelling interest that goes well beyond 24 weeks? Yes. I could walk you through some of the penalties and the exceptions. We made sure they're the same ones we have in existing Idaho statutes, so we weren't going to be having to fight those arguments or trying to fight the compelling interest argument, to keep a clean push that we're moving the line. So with that, this does a great deal. Please help me and join me in protecting human life, baby life, preborn life, and help us do what we can to provide those protections for those most vulnerable. And with that, I'd ask for your support.
Thank you. Debate is closed. The question before us is, shall House Bill number 366 pass the House? The clerk will unlock the machine and the members will record their votes. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change his vote? The clerk will lock the machine and read the pairs.
Kirby votes aye. Ruchti votes nay. Davis votes nay. Skog votes aye. Barbieri votes nay. Palmer votes aye.
The vote count shows 53 in favor with 16 against and 1 absent. House Bill number 366 has passed the House and will be transmitted to the Senate.